10 welterweights collide. Coming up this weekend, the Nomad Shavkat Rakhmonov puts up his undefeated record against Texan finisher, hands of steel, Geoff Neal. And this is a big-time fight in the welterweight division, and a lot of the big pundits in the MMA media world, they're all over the hotness that is Shavkat Rakhmonov. And here at Fight Night Picks, we've been happy to have him since he came over from M1 Global, and he was an underdog in his debut against Alex Oliveira. And really excited about the stuff that Rakhmonov did over with M1, the spin kicks to the body. You've seen the spinning head kicks in the UFC.
My goodness.
He tried it with Prazeres. He landed it on Harris. He's done some crazy things. But even when Rakhmonov got taken down in fights with M1 Global, he threatened with guillotines, he'd go for submissions, and then he'd scramble out of bad positions. Rakhmonov, one of the bigger guys that you're going to find in the welterweight division, frame-wise, but now he's taken on a very tough test in a guy like Geoff Neal. For Neal, he had all of the complications health-wise that you could have in the world. He came back off of that. And then he took on Stephen Thompson, and he couldn't figure out the distance in that fight. And he was really chasing for a lot of it. Then he took on Neil Magny, a little bit of the same, struggled with the well-roundedness of a tricky guy like Magny, and you might say, well, MMA math. One guy overwhelmingly beat Neil Magny. One guy lost the decision. So Rakhmonov wins off that alone. Not necessarily, because out of Geoff Neal in the last two fights, the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight, tough, gritty fight. His last time out against Vicente Luque finishes him. And if you watch Geoff Neal fights, they're not all roses out of these wins. Go watch his fight against Nico Price. He gets dropped in that one. He gets put on skates more than once. But boy, oh boy, when he gets the takedown in that one and hits the ground and pound, he rallies hard in that.
Geoff Neal doesn't care. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like, Geoff Neal's a big underdog in this fight. He's been a big underdog in a lot of his fights. He doesn't care about any of that. Like, Geoff Neal is who he is, and when he fights up to his full potential, he is a very difficult matchup for anybody in the division.
He's like that lyric from the Beastie Boys. He's cool as a cucumber in a bowl of hot sauce.
Oh, without a doubt. And the nice thing about Neal is, too, he's a disciplined fighter who will brawl when he has to, but in a good way. I don't mean that as a guy who will get very uncomposed and he'll feel the pressure in the pocket. He'll get a guy hurt, finish him, brawl when he has to brawl after he gets the guy hurt, like we saw in the Luque fight. Like, normally when we talk about Geoff Neal, it's, hey, he hurts somebody and stays composed, but in the Luque fight, he did with 9 straight uppercuts just to get him out of there, and it was nice to see that level of aggression out of Geoff Neal, because if there has been any knock to him when he fights other guys at the top level, it's he isn't able to hurt them like he is able to hurt guys, especially at the earlier part of his career, and he does tend to struggle with some of the movement of his opponent. Neil Magny, a guy who moves very well, always has throughout his MMA career, unless you chop down the legs, and Wonderboy Thompson, of course, has some of the best footwork we've ever seen in MMA. The Ponzinibbio fight was a very close fight between those two guys. It was split decision. Close fight, though.
Yeah, and I know at the time I had it for Ponzinibbio, but a close fight regardless.
Yeah. One of those, everybody won, because it was a very fun fight to watch, too. But what I did like out of Neal was he did go after it in that fight. He didn't seem to be as on the back foot as he was in the Wonderboy fight. And I do look at Geoff Neal. The comparison's not perfect between Francis Ngannou fighting Stipe and Derek Lewis, but a little part of me feels like Geoff Neal had his Stipe fight in the Wonderboy fight and had to have that Neil Magny fight to kind of knock the rust off for him to then go on this run. And I don't know if Geoff Neal's going to be able to go beat everybody in the top 15, but he's one of those fighters that you want to see fight everybody who's ranked, because he has good takedown defense, so if you're a great wrestler, it's going to be tested. He's a phenomenal striker, of course, who's got a really good chin, good gas tank. Like, he just checks all those boxes, what you do want a very promising prospect to have. But I get to pat myself on the back, because I have been talking about Shavkat Rakhmonov and how he should be in the top of this division for a long time now. I know it's difficult to just jump a guy into the top 15 without actually going through the opponents, but when you did look at Shavkat Rakhmonov on his way up to the UFC, you just had to look at the skills that he had, and he had every skill there was. He is a great kickboxer. He has some of the submission ability, and we talk about a lot of fighters like this. Like, Yair Rodriguez is a fighter who has great striking and great submission ability, but he lacks some of the wrestling transition ability. Shavkat Rakhmonov has the bridge between his submissions and his striking that a lot of these fighters do lack, and that's why I have had a lot of confidence in him on his way throughout the UFC.
Shavkat bullies a lot of these guys, and against Neil Magny, he put him in a pretzel very early on. Against Michel Prazeres, he just kind of hung on the outside, and the commentary praised him on his jab, and he pawed out there, and Prazeres would try and come in, and then he started to get really confident in that fight, and Prazeres, I mean...
Harris is a good fighter that nobody's going to give credit for.
Carlston is Harris, is
Yeah.
a guy that you want to see fight every weekend because his grappling's insane, his front chokes are great, and his striking sets everything up. And Rachmanov again was
none of
able
that.
to land the takedown. He was able to go out there, and then once it hit the feet again, spinning wheel kick. But when you look at Rachmanov, I say for Jeff Neal, he's a Texan finisher. Rachmanov, you've seen it by now in the graphics. Perfect. 8 knockouts, 8 submissions. And for him in the UFC,
incredible.
he's continued to get it to go. And even before the UFC, you talk about the level of names, and you might not recognize some of the fighters, but you should recognize Jun Young Park, catch weight at 176, and he was able to go out there and win that one. In the UFC, I mean, it's hard not to mention, again, for Jeff Neal, you look at him, he was one of the early Dana White's Contender Series successes, not the filler that you've gotten in some of these other seasons, but the wins in the UFC. First fight in the UFC, beats Brian Camozzi. They gave Brian Camozzi hard matchups in the UFC.
They did
Beat
no
Frank
favors.
Camacho, beat Bilal Muhammad, beat Nico Price in a fight where there's 2 head kicks from Nico Price. Then they land Dan Hardy, Carlos Condit, double hooks at the same time. Now, Jeff Neal's credited with being knocked down. Nico Price lands on his knees and then lands on top. So it was kind of wild how that one happened. And then Jeff Neal decimated Mike Perry. So it's been a weird career arc for Jeff Neal. We've obviously seen him tested more than a guy like Shavkat. But the thing that Jeff Neal can do that some of these other guys haven't in the UFC with Shavkat is bridge distance in a fight like this against Rachmanov and have him figure out, are we at long range, are we at short range? Because some of these other guys haven't been able to do that in these short fights.
But the problem is, Jeff Neal still has to get on the inside of Rachmanov's range because of how big he is. So Neal might be able to dictate what the range is, but all of Jeff Neal's ranges are inside of Rachmanov's. If Rachmanov is using his kicks and if he's on all the way on the outside, he's actually probably going to be the one who's able to dictate the range, especially with his wrestling, because Jeff Neal's a good defensive grappler. He does have good submissions in his back pocket, but if we just talk about pure offensive wrestling, I don't think these two guys are on the same planet. Rachmanov bullied Neil Magny, and Neil Magny has weaknesses in his game, but that weakness is normally leg kicks and overhands. It's not normally wrestling from guys who aren't from America, because, like, being Colby Covington
Master
is one
sport
thing.
and combat sambo and MMA. Shavkat Rachmanov.
Rachmanov just doesn't have a lot of weaknesses in his game, and that's what normally a lot of people rest on when a prospect's fighting these guys on the way up is, hey, could they get knocked out by the one punch? Do they leave their neck open on takedowns? Rachmanov up until this point hasn't shown any of those weaknesses, and when his opponent doesn't have to take advantage of a weakness and when they are able to have success, he has shown the fight IQ to then, okay, switch it up. Now I use my wrestling and go for the takedown. Oh, you're a good grappler? I defend your takedowns, force you to be a striker. I just think I think he's going to make it all the way up until like the Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards, Shemaev level. Because I think in the welterweight division, those were the names that immediately came to mind. So I feel like those are kind of a little bit ahead of everybody else. I think he belongs in that category, not to give my pick away too early.
Well, a big fight. Both of us going with Shavkat Rachmanov in the matchup. He's a big favorite here. The Topology votes, we won't leave it to surprise. 93% of them have Rachmanov. 62% by submission to get the win. We'll go with Rachmanov here, but man, a really fun fight. The odds don't suggest the level of excitement to this fight,
Exactly.
so you can't wait for it on Saturday night. Some big ones on this card, Matt. The two that are left, Shevchenko Grasso for the flyweight title, and John Jones for Cyril Gane for that heavyweight title. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.